Hello, my name is Brant Hunt. How are you guys doing today? My channel simply is Discerning What is True. I'm going to be reading another chapter here today, chapter 5 from Langdon's book called The Revelation of the Holy Spirit, decoded by Phil. This is chapter 5. This is called The Scroll and the Lamb. So thank you for being here. We'll get into this. It's a very short chapter. It's going to deal with what we call the Hierophane. And let me show you what that looks like in the tarot cards. And it's simply called The Scroll and the Lamb. So here we go. Appreciate you guys being here, pursuing deeper things, things that most people are not aware of. The Scroll and the Lamb, in line with the previous coupling of chapters to the feminine principle, chapter 4 and 5 of Revelation, focus on the masculine principle, that is, the fifth tarot card is the Hierophane, the Pope, so to speak, the one with the supreme wisdom that everyone turns to for advice, the Illuminate, dressed as the Son of God in white and red, wearing a three-tiered, that is, spiritual golden crown, and holding the staff of Axis Mundi, the axis center of the world. The fifth Hebrew letter is He, H-E, that is 5. One of the letters in the name of God, Yah, He, Va, He. The Mahara tells us that the design of the He is comprised of Dele and Yut. The Dele is composed of one horizontal line that is significantly width, and another that is vertical, that is significantly height, which together represents the physical world, the world of materialism. The Yud, that is the detached left leg, represents God. And thus spirituality, just as the Lay and the Yod come together to form the He, so too one has an obligation to imbue and sanctify the physical world with spirituality and godliness. In Chazit thought, that is, the He represents thought, speech, and action, just as the form of the He is composed of 3 lines. So do thought, speech, and action comprise the 3 garments of the soul, the 3 garments through which we express ourselves. 5 significant, that is, 5 that is signifies, I should say, the 5 levels of the soul. Defects, N-E-F-E-S-H, Rog, R-U-A-C-H, Diashama, that's N-E-S-H-A-M-A-H, Chaya, which is C-H-A-Y-A-H, and Yetahita, which is Y-E-C-H-I-D-A-H, the 5th tier. Sorry, good. The first 5 means union. People commonly refer to the level of the soul as the Pinto Yi, Y-I-D, the godly spark that every Jew possesses. The Pinnacle Yield is the spark that can never become contaminated or extinguished. The spark that unites every illuminate, that is illuminate meaning Jew, with God. This is why I've shared with you, because of from Phil, a Jew in the past was someone who was initiative, wanted to go into what we call the mystery school, and would spend 7 years there. And what that meant simply was that was a big deal long ago. What it meant simply is if he was, most of the time this would take place with men. I don't know if it took place with women or not. I don't know that. So I can't give you a yes or no with that. But the men who wanted to be initiated into this mystery school would have to be men uh, who were willing to spend 7 years of their life to find the mysteries and find out, why they're here and what is their purpose here, that type of thing. And that meant simply is that it just simply couldn't willy-nilly and take off and go back home. It's a kind of a commitment, so to speak. It was a significant, when you think about this, think about this as a young man at 20 years old or 18, so to speak. Maybe later on, who knows? Maybe the man's even, I don't think there would be a possibility of a man being married. It would be almost impossible for that to work out because the man would probably have to be single. This would be a decision very young in his life, or it could be older. So the word he has 3 meanings. The first is here is, as in the verse, here is seed for you, end quote. The next is to be disturbed, as it states in Daniel, quote, and I, Daniel, was disturbed, end quote. And the third is behold, as in behold, this is our God. In other words, a quote. And refers to beholding a revelation. I always think this simply is, this is my thinking, so this is not from Bill, but I would think the word revelation meaning to reveal something that is revealed to you. Revelation is something that's being revealed to you. This is what the book, I think, is about, is revealing hidden symbols, way of thinking, and not in the literal framework. When we are born and come into the world, God gives us seeds, that is, for example, the potential, that is, to be productive and make good of our lives. I don't think people even realize that. I think that people are, I don't know, even I understood that until later in my life. So there's a potentiality of basically you're supposed to be productive when you come here. That is to make good on our lives. And that is actually to find out who you are spiritually. Sometimes, however, we become disturbed and confused and lose sight of our objectives. Eventually, though, every initiative will come to do teshuvah and acknowledge his creator. He will then behold the revelation of God. By elevating one's thought and speech and translating them into action, one reveals the 5th level as part of the Mashah. I may have pronounced it wrong, so forgive me, or it could be simply Messiah within his soul. So this is something we always look at the Messiah as someone else. And what Phil, I think, is trying to reveal here, the spark, which takes place up in your head. This is when you meet God, you see. And this will bring us to the ultimate redemption, you see. So 5 is the first number to reference of ascension of the 5th element, you see. It being the spiritual ascension, or it could be simply as what we call ether. But you had to have the other 4 in order to become the 5th, you see. That is rising like a pyramid from the square tomb of matter. Making a square with the same outer measure as the circle it represents, effectively defining a 5th point for the square and a center for the infinite circle, you see. It is technically algebraic, impossible, and therein lies the issue. Ascension is also physically impossible, and in this sense, only made possible with God's spiritual help. You see, this is why when someone has something of this event in their lives, they are, how would I say it? They are very thankful for God. They have a feeling. There's the only way I know this is simply what Phil has shared with me, and I might be wrong on all things because I've forgotten some of the things too. But feeling of simply happiness within someone, but it's not within someone. It actually is expressed even in someone in their happiness on the outside, who they are. They finally found what they were looking for or searching for. Without God, there is no salvation, you see, since God is salvation. So we're going to read Revelation 5, verse 1. Then I saw in the right hand of him who sat on the throne a scroll with writing on both sides and sealed with 7 seals. As the ascension person, that is John, we see the right hand of the Creator immediately in front of us, the scroll and the text, you see. It is an allegory for us, you see. See if he has some artwork here in this book. I don't know if he does or not. Don't see any so far. No, there's no artwork in this one, this chapter. It's very short. The scroll is a text and is an allegory for us. The hierophane, that is the example of a pope, the authority of God on earth, who wears the garb of a fisher king known as John or John Honest. This chapter is really about John, who represents us, you see, in the ascended position of Aries, the zodiac sign of the ram associated with the head, portrayed as a lamb in this case, standing in the throne. The two-sided scroll represents our sympathetic and cerebrospinal nervous system, since it is sealed with 7 chakras. Verse 2, again back to Revelation chapter 5. And I saw a mighty angel proclaiming in a loud voice, quote, "Who is worthy to break the seals and open the scroll?" Verse 3, but no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth could open the scroll or even look inside it. A mighty angel is not another angel who has suddenly turned up out of the blue. The mighty angel is always the Son of God, who has many associations. Quote, proclaiming in a loud voice, end quote. It's a figure of speech for some form of force or action. If the Lamb is the only thing that can unite the chakras and open the scroll, there is no wonder no one else can do it. You see. Verse 4, I wept and wept because no one was found who was worthy to open the scroll or look inside. So I'm going to say something here. I'm going to kind of elaborate on this. What the reason why he's weeping simply is that in his mind and thinking here, there's no one here to show me the truth. You know, think about that. Think about this whole apparatus here in a way. And we have the Bible, probably the bestseller book in the world, and no one understands it. And that's true. No one does understand it, because we have people who have tell us what they think it's done, because they've been basically programmed and told what tell their particular parishioners or members of their church, and they've gone to school to learn these things supposedly. But what they've learned is man's theology. Okay, it's nothing to do with God. It's just a theology, so to speak. It's just what they think God is. You see, they're looking at it again, reading things into it, not reading into things, but they're actually just taking a literal framework and thinking this is what it is, because that's just what they think. So there's not only wept, there's simply a feeling of sorrow that there's no one there that's going to be able to reveal this to us, or to him who's there. Verse 5 says, then one of the elders said to me, quote, do not weep. See, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has triumphed. He is able to open the scroll, and it is 7 seals. And John is said to weep at the news that no person is as perfect as God or the Son of God, the Lamb, and therefore cannot open the scroll of ascension. In other words, this is the whole deal, revealing something. For example, here's the deal. I wouldn't know any of this stuff. Seriously, guys. I wouldn't know any of this stuff. When I say no, I'm just simply learning from Phil Langdon. I'm reading from what it is in his books. I wouldn't know this stuff. Do you understand the appreciation you should have for Phil Langdon, who has actually shared this information? I'm not trying to put him on a pedestal. What I am saying simply is he is an angel. And people will struggle. You say, well, what are you talking about? It's like, well, he had ascension, folks. That's what this is about. So I feel myself, in a lot of ways, a very fortunate person, a fortunate man, to even be able to not only to communicate with him and partake of talking with him personally. Doesn't mean I'm better than him. It has nothing to do with that. It's just that the ability, the searching that I'm searching in my life, trying to find these things in my life, trying to find out what this place is all about, not understanding mostly what I'm going on. It's a narrow path. It's out in the woods, so to speak. There's hardly any. In fact, it's so grown up that you can even find the path, hard enough to find the path. I'm just giving you an analysis of what I think it's like for me spiritually, because simply I'm searching such and such and looking over here. Nope, that's not it. Okay, and I was involved in a lot of different groups before I even got to this. Okay. I read certain books and thought it was this. I thought astrology was part of it. Nope, not it. I was involved in a group with that. Again, I pulled away from that because I knew it wasn't correct. That's, there's nothing special about me. Okay, that's not the point. The thing I'm seeing here simply is I was drawn, went somewhere else, and God, with His ability to what I would call, which we have, is free will, He allows us to do whatever to search things. And I remember many years ago, I guess it's probably 4 years ago, maybe a little longer than that, a particular person I knew of, asked me. I said, I think I asked her, what would it take for me to learn these things, such and such, and she said, "Oh, well, you need to quote unquote sell your house and come to me." And that was a pretty big deal at that time. And I said, "What do you mean sell my house? I don't even know who you are." I said, "I'd like to go visit you, but I'm not going to sell my house." And I don't know. I know this person is not. It's a false teacher. That's what this person is. It's a false teacher. So when I experienced this, probably 4 or 5 years ago, so that was probably in 2019, 2020, I immediately realized that something was not right, and it was actually a sign to me. Sorry about that. A sign to me in some way simply is you're not telling the truth. You're not. If you are demanding me to be out here, almost as though I'm supposed to take up your faith and come. So what she was trying to do was simply, as I gathered, was to me to sell my house. And then I guess she was thinking that I was going to come there and be taught all these things with astrology. And then I gathered simply that she would probably ask get money from me. You see, I don't know. I never went that far. Something told me this is not right. And I backed up out of it. I said, "No, you're false." I didn't say that to her personally, but I knew deep down simply, no, you're trying to fool me. So these are false teachers along the way. Okay. Now you got to understand, I grew up in the church and all this stuff is when I hear these things and these were bad things that we were talking about when I'm talking about now. When I talk about astrology or either looking at scripture differently, this would be seen as, you're of the devil in the church. Okay. So you have to understand, I went to seminary and that was over 20 some years ago. And then I saw something wrong with that. So it's a process that I've gone through, not to say I'm any better than anybody else. No, everybody goes through this process. It's a different process for different people. Okay. And so when you go through these things and say, so you have the free will, God gives you that free will. He gives you the opportunity. So what I'm saying simply is that, I could have done, I'm going to go ahead and pursued and got this church history degree and go and become a professor teaching church history. But when I encountered what I saw as false at that time, I said I could no longer do this. I remember talking with a friend, and this friend says, "What are you doing? Such and such." In other words, you need to go back. Like, I'm not going back. And so you see your trusted friends, or you think you're friends, and they don't know any better. It's not their fault. It has nothing to do with that. But you have to. This is when you're on the path. You're on the path of trying to find the truth. Have I found the truth? At this point, yes, I have found the truth, but I have not ascended. So I am just a pupil, so to speak, or a student of Phil Langdon, you see. Okay. So that's just a personal story. Um, so, a lot of people look at astrology in a way that is, how would I say it? In a way that simply is that, that reveals something, but that's in the physical sense, you see. I'm not saying they don't teach things that are true, but I also know simply there's a limitation, you see. So you learn these things. It's like like I said, you're on a path, and is this part of God's quote unquote way of protecting you? I don't know. I really don't. I have no idea. Um, I just noticed simply I've been searching this for things to try to figure these things out, and so even this was like 2021, I think it was, but I also was involved in another particular group, a gentleman named Richard Rose, who is, no longer living, but he's mainly talking about Zen, and he's dead. He's already dead. He's no longer living. So there are others who have taken over and teaching these things. They claim that something's happened to their lives, such and such, but they don't really they don't elaborate in it. They don't go into what I would call the details. That bothered me because I said anybody could say these things. So you have these guys who are now looked upon. This was a group that was actually involved with Richard Rose, with the Zen movement. And Richard Rose was an American guy. This guy was much older than all of us at that age, because if he would have been in the 70s, probably 74, 75, then I would have been 14 or 15 years old. But there were people who were actually involved with him, mainly college age students at this point. There were no high school students. Some were, but some very few, but they were not there. It was basically, students that were in college. So you're probably looking at, 20-year-old kids. So these were people probably born in the, 1950s. And Phil was, not Phil, but this guy, Richard Rose, was involved, such and such. And eventually he passed away. They built a ashram where he's at, in his West Virginia area. He owned some property. I think he was a good guy. I'm not saying he's bad. I don't think he was. I don't see any. I'm not against anybody of this nature. It's just a process that I've gone through to try to figure out where the truth is. The problem simply is that part of what Richard Rose is speaking is somewhat true. Zen simply being still. You see, coming to a point. A lot of times they would speak about going out in the woods and just kind of being still. I'd done that certain times, but I wasn't still as they were speaking of. What bothered me the most was they would use certain words that, yet they would not give what I would consider a personal testimony of something that happened to them. What I mean by that simply is to reveal what did happen to you, and let's get to the points. Let's get into details, and that's not offered. And I was actually in a study group for approximately a year, and I left that group because I felt simply are you really telling the truth here? I don't think you are. Are you thinking you got part of it? Which Phil Langdon speaks about this. There are two parts of the salvation deal. There's not one part. And he's done this. He's elaborated and spoken about it. Yeah, it is when you become still. It's part of it. And part of that is some of that's done with people with, Kundalini or other effects, so to speak. But they met God. I'm not doubting that, you see. But they went right back. Nothing else happened in their lives. So what I'm trying to say simply here is that people who have these experiences they're not bad people, folks. It's not that. It's just as simply as they never finished a job. They never finished it. It never did the second part. The second part simply is, why did God choose me? And stew on that, and come to the revelation of, okay, this is something pretty significant. It's just part of what I've gone through. Anyway, I'm kind of gone off on a tangent here, but the points I'm trying to explain to you is that these are not bad people. They just haven't done the complete work. And the reality is simply is I'm in the same boat as they are. Okay, so I don't know all of it. I'm just learning from Phil Langdon. So anyway, we'll get back to what I was saying here. One of the elders in this case is going to be God. And how and why? If we welcome the 24 elders as a Merkabah, the spiritual tetrahedron has all three aspects of spirit, one of which is God, who has greater authority than the Son of God. So by inference, it is God who says, quote, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has triumphed, end quote, as a way of referring to his son, the Lion of Judah. The word Judah means thanksgiving or praise, and relates to that. In other words, sorry, or I should, as a way of referring to, okay, thanksgiving, and relates to Leo, which is a fire sign, and the crown chakra. David, reincarnated, is the spiritual son of God. And I want to go back to this word. He says Judah. So let's go look. I'm going to look in this particular book here. Probably I've already mentioned it, not here, but actually done some personal videos on this particular thing with this particular metaphysical dictionary, and see what the word Judah really means here, and see if it's what's being shared here. There's Jonathan's mentioned here, Joseph. Judah simply means praise in Hebrew. It's from Genesis 29:35. The sense of smell, the inculity of hope and spiritual fragrance, inoperative on three planes of activity: physical, mental, and spiritual. So that's what Bill speaks about. Also, he speaks about these three eagles here. And let's see if I can find my spot. So the word Judah means thanksgiving or praise. Okay, so that's what it's saying here. It means simply praise. Hebrew means praise. It relates to Leo and the crown chakra. David reincarnated is the spirit son of God. We continue on with James M. Price, P-R-Y-S-E, tells us in the Apocalypse Unsealed that, quote, the, quote, line is, of course, Leo, which is also the sign of Judah. The, quote, root, end quote, of man is his spiritual self, or the mystical, that is, tree of life, end quote. Man is the inverted Ashvaghata tree, which has its roots in the heavens and its branches on the earth. Therefore, the, quote, root of David is David reincarnated. So Revelation 5:6 says, quote, then I saw a lamb looking as if it had been slain, standing in the center of the throne, encircled by the four living creatures and the elders. The lamb is the newly generated nous of the illuminate, quote, encircled by the four living creatures, because they are, in fact, its side walls. The illuminate is the one who sacrificed themselves for truth and life. So if you hear what he's saying here, is someone has sanctified themselves for truth. So they pursued this in their life. They pursued it deeply and unified the dual opposites to find the secrets of unification. This is why I speak so highly of duality within us and coming to the point of being singularity, that is being single-minded. Double-minded man is always here and there, so to speak. It's never, quote unquote, at peace within itself. So the dual opposites define the secret of unification. The 24 elders, thanks to God, is the philosophical union of spirit and energy. We might then take the next statement as the mental faculties of the illuminate in regards their nervous system, already mentioned as the scroll with 7 seals. And quote, he has 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out into all the earth. Previously, and in other examples, the use of the word eyes refers to the beams from the Lamb. Yet there are 32 beams, not 7. In other words, this is what Phil is explaining to you right here, is where he had the ascension moment, and this whole part of taking place that he saw 32 beams, not 7. In this case, horns and eyes of the Lamb itself are applicable to the existence in 7 kingdoms. That is to do with the horns and the chakras. That is the chakras to do with the eyes / angels. Eyes are receptive as the chakra receives divine light, and horns are active as the kingdoms are like 7 hills. These are the products of the Creator sent out into the universe. However, man is the cosmos in a nutshell, and we will find correspondence in the patterns of the body, that is, with chakras, as well as the head by itself, to the creative principle and its archon structure. According to the author James M. Price, the horns and eyes relate to the illuminate 7 active and perceptive mental, that is, noetic, powers, respectively. It is mindfulness which associates with godliness from the 4 samadhi centers where singular understanding that produces the light is achieved. The Apocalypse Unsealed presents this verse as, quote, "The Lamb is a variant of the ram Aries, and the Lamb here is identical with the line of the tribe of Judah, or Judah, Juda, end quote. Since the sign Leo is the sola domicile of the sun, and Aries is the place of his highest exaltation. Microcosmically, Leo corresponds to the Sahasrara chakra, the 3rd eye, and Aries to the nimbus, or cerebral radiance, end quote. Quote, "This Lamb is the incarnated Gnosis, the intellectual sun, S-U-N, which may be regarded as the 3rd Logos, that is, man as he is on earth. The horns and eyes are the 7 noetic meaning mental, powers of actions, and the 7 noetic, again, meaning, again, mental, perceptive faculties. Thus, the Lamb represents the neophyte, whose inner nature is awakened, and who is about to undergo the perfecting or initiatory ordeals," end quote. Revelation 5:7, "He came and took the scroll from the right hand of him who sat on the throne." Verse 8, "And when he had taken it, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb. Each one had a harp, and they were holding golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints." The one who takes the scroll, as Phil explains, is the illuminate, taking back their body with the light on return from the abyss. So when Phil talks about the abyss, when he's explained it in the past, it's when you enter this, I'm trying to think, it's put in a trance. And part of this takes place is the abyss within your head, you see. And this is part 2 of the whole thing, part of this, some things. But this is part 1 also when I'm sharing, so it's not part 2. From the abyss. The abyss is just simply just a dark place, which reveals, which is taking place in your head, which there is darkness within your head. There's nothing but darkness there, spiritually, seeing, physically seeing this is what he's seeing with his own eyes when he's there in that particular in that state of mind. With its 7 seals and nervous system, the aspect of the light, that is, in brackets, meaning 4 living creatures and elders, become venerations to its nature. They are its nature. The chakras are wheels of subtle prana, that is the, in brackets, golden bowls of incense, in a subtle form of energy flow up the body of chakras. The notion of perfecting this activity may be compared to the initiative as a finely tuned harp or lyre, maintaining uninterrupted flow in the same sense that a harp can only be played when the strings are tight enough. Another quote here. The prayers of the saints, as he says here, quote, are realized by the ascension of initiative, who makes the fifth element. This is the ultimate reason for all the suffering and praying for divine guidance and help during life. So what he's saying simply here is that those who do this, God does hear, you see, and it's a movement towards, finding the truth. And with this creates the fifth element. This illustration simply of the pyramid. It's just an illustration of the pyramid simply is to reveal that the four become centralized and eventually come to the center. And then with that, it gives you the center of the pyramid to where you need. So it's actually showing you something. This is the path to go up and eventually to the part of what we call the capstone, which the capstone, again, is your head. It's the part of your head, you see. So let's see if I got off this. Okay, so we've done that. So verse 9, and they sung a new song. Quote, you are worthy to take the scroll and to open its seals, because you were slain, and with your blood you purchased men for God, that is, men for God, from every tribe and language and people and nation. Verse 10, you have made them to be a kingdom and priests to serve our God, and they will reign on the earth. All this is associated even with my background simply is to do with Christianity, singing a new song. In other words, a new song is in a way, something's like a joyful song, a realization that you finally found the truth in your life, and you want to sing a new song and give glory to God, you see. The newly illuminated individual has now become an angel, thanks to the grace of God. Yeah, it's all based upon God's goodness and his grace. You haven't done anything. In some ways, it's part of the plan, so to speak. The Son of God is the worldly perfection to open the chakras and unify them from the sixth center, to illuminate and override the ignorance caused by physical nature alone. Purchasing men from every corner of the universe is true in spiritual terms. They have turned into the kingdom of heaven, while still in physical life as natural aspects of God, who do not need to wear special robes to highlight their uniqueness. Correct. Yeah. It's like I said, what is being revealed on the outward part, people think this is where most people get confused, just by the garb of what is worn in churches, especially what I would call high churches, because they'll wear certain clothing, and it kind of gives an idea that these people are from God, but it's not. Let's see. They even think they have done it. They think they're part of it. Not what we're talking about with Phil, but basically they have a different connotation or understanding that that's what they think, but they haven't achieved illumination at all. What comes out of their mouth and the works they do is enough to know they are from God. Their mental and spiritual attributes are their robes of white and gold. Quote, they will reign on earth, is a statement about the nature of royalty. Illumination is royalty and authority, since God is involved directly. Royalty then is supposed to be the presence of divine authority on earth. In this sentence, again, earth means the physical plane, impersonal, or physical nature personal, hence cosmically. They will reign on their home planets throughout the cosmos, and personally, the Logos will reign over their body. Both are valid. Verse 11. Then I looked and heard the voice of many angels, numbering thousands upon thousands and 10,000s, times 10,000. They encircle the throne and the living creatures and the elders. Here's a realistic comment on the potential number of angels. Notice the spiritual conqueror number being 1,000. Okay, so Phil has shared this with me. We've talked about it a little bit, probably a couple months ago. When the numbers are even like they are, it's not like for example, the feeding of the 5,000. Okay, why is it 5,000? Okay, why is it a nice even number? That should be the giveaway for you to say something's wrong here. Would there have been something 4,444? Well, we'll just round off, 5,000, such and such. It's to kind of, in some ways, to get your attention. So it's not 1,999 here, you see, but it's 1,000 is used 4 times to comply with the union of saints. Union of spirit, which is 1,000, and energy. And 4 is elementary, elementaries. There are trillions of angels because that is what every creature with rationale in the universe is born to become, whether they know it or not yet. Eventually, all make it, since truth is robust. To say angels encircle the throne is simply a way of saying their home or root is the throne of heaven. Their lamb is worthy of 7 blessings as the 7 spirits of God. Verse 12, in a loud voice they sang, worthy is the lamb who was slain to receive power and power and wealth and wisdom and strength and honor and glory and praise. Now we go to verse 13. Then I heard every creature in heaven and on earth and under the earth and on the sea and all that is in them singing, quote, to him who sits on the throne and to the Lamb be praise and honor and glory and power forever and ever. Verse 14, the 4 living creatures said, Amen, or Amen, and the elders fell down and worshiped. If we are hearing about every single creature in the universe, then we are hearing about the goal and result of existence. The illuminate overcomes incarnation and becomes a permanent member of the heavenly city of angels. Quote, honor, glory, and power, end quote, is a triple statement of metaphysical completed by ascension forever and ever, end quote. So that is the end of chapter 5. It went a little bit longer than I thought it was because it kind of went a little bit elaborates about some things I've discovered in my process of learning these things, understanding these things, you see. So the next chapter we'll go through, I don't know if we'll do one tonight, another one, this has been 2 today. We might do another one the next day or so, will be the chapter 6 of Revelation. So, I will say this, the church itself has got it all wrong. When I mean all wrong, I don't mean all wrong, but there are certain symbols that are still there, but no one knows what these symbols mean. Even the architecture of what I would call the older churches are revealing something, that the temple itself is within man. This is what Rene Delitz, I'm trying to think his name, he's a Frenchman, and his wife, they went there and got perfect, what they call measurements in the temples where they were at in Egypt. They spent 15 years doing that, you see. And Schroller is his last name. He's written many books about this. Even his wife wrote some books also. He was searching himself, seeking for deeper things himself. But yet you have people today who write books who never talk about this stuff. They don't talk about this stuff at all. The well-known people you're talking about, such and such, get all the headlines, such and such on their book. What's the word? The authors get paid, big sums of money for their books, such and such, and they're out there, and they're deceiving. They're deceiving many people, and they themselves think it's the truth, but in reality, it's not. And you need to stay away from people who, quote unquote, who want your money. That's a red flag, no matter who it is. Because they come to your bunkman or whatever, or the church or whatever. That's deception. The salvation itself is free. It should be offered free to all people. It shouldn't be charged for anything, you see. And we live in that day someplace that Phil has been very kind to share what he's revealed, what has happened to him, and wants to reveal that to others. Well, naturally he would. He doesn't want to see anybody else to, he doesn't want to see people who simply keep reincarnating here. There's an opportunity as you're here in life here to reincarnate, not reincarnate, but to actually find why you're here. You see the purpose of why you're here. The purpose is not to gain all the riches of this world. That's bullshit, you see. And that's being held up always as a quote unquote the American dream or whatever you want to call it out there. But that's what natural men think of, you know. That's the perspective, or fame, whatever you want to call it. So anyway, thank you for being here again. Today is the, I think it's the seventh day. It is the 7th day of November 2024, and wish you a good night and take care. Yes, Mr. Anthro, you've got some statements here. Let me see if I can get these all. Yeah, it's sad. Yeah, I understand. People are blind. Ecclesiastic dogma. Yeah, well, dogma itself is doctrines. Um, those doctrines were not created by God. Those are man's way trying to explain what the Bible is about. So they create these doctrines or dogma. Dogma simply is just a rigorous type of way of seeing Scripture, and so and you'll find that one other thing is to do with what we call with church history. You have someone who's a learned man long ago. And I'm not putting each of these people down. It's just simply is that they're, you know, they think they know, but they don't know. And when you come in with a certain literal perspective in reading Scripture, you're going to think that's the truth, you see. But in reality, it's not. But, you know, there's books upon books on dogma or doctrines of the church. And that's not just one church, that's in many different churches. If you want to think about it in the Lutheran perspective, in the Catholic perspective, and in the Calvinist perspective, which would say the Calvinists and the Lutherans would be what you call more of to do with the modern Reformation and Reform, which Reform simply is meaning they didn't throw out what we call, they kept some of the apparatus. In other words, what they should have did in some ways, but they didn't know, or did they? They did not destroy the foundation of the Catholic Church, because simply they brought those things in to the Reformed faith or the Lutheran faith to a point that basically what I'm trying to say, it's just a reformation, it's just a reform. It means simply is they've kept the foundation there. It's just like looking at a house, so to speak. And you look at a house and you look, okay, we're going to keep the foundation here. So the foundation is basically the belief systems that they hold on to with the Catholic Church. In fact, you have that very clearly, Mr. Anterope, to do with the belief that in the Reformed churches and in the Calvinist churches, they was considered the father of their churches, that is, their Protestant religions, to be Augustine and whatever he taught, you see, and the literal perspective, you see. So they brought that into it. So this is what people don't understand. The key word is reformation. That's what it's about. But it's not a completely tearing all the foundation out and building a new foundation, so to speak, you see. But it's all, again, based upon their theories of what God is saying. This is talking about doctrinal issues, you say. yeah, that whole idea is that this what I call a flip flop. When I talk about when you say the issue of New Age, the New Age simply is another. It's a it's an easier, cheaper way to get to heaven. Okay, that's what it is. I mean, I'm not. I don't mean it in a. It's just. It's a. It's a completely baffling. What's the word? It's a jettison of what was in the past of traditional teachings of the church. It's a jettison, throwing it out. So it throws everything out. Okay. All right. And so now they come in with a New Age perspective, such and such. And with that perspective, you're all over the place. Okay. So, and I'm not saying the other groups are not. I'm saying simply it's the same thing took place with religion and Catholic theology, whatever. It's also, it's not even, it is also some way simply throwing the Bible out also. It's coming in with their perspective. Any kind of guru comes in and writes something and says, okay, he knows it all, such and such, da 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 da. And there are many good gurus out there today, you see. So what's happened simply is a jettison of the Bible, such and such, and saying it's not true. Well, it's not true in the literal framework. Of course not. You see, there's a middle ground here. So let's just look at this here. Also, the two pillars, and so to speak. So you have the classic, what we call classic religion, and now you have the New Age, different on the other side. So you have the left being New Age, and the other part being religion, that is to do with Christianity. But the reality is simply is both are wrong. And the reason the struggle simply is to be able to see the Bible in a fresh way, not based upon what the past was, but it's not in a literal framework. Okay, so most people are left Christianity, and they have, and rightfully so. They should leave Christianity because Christianity is not teaching the truth. They're teaching a God who's going to judge and blow you away, so to speak. They're saying you go to hell. All these type of things. Okay, they don't talk about, even though at one time the church did teach reincarnation long ago, until probably mid 500s. I don't know exactly the date. I know at some time I dealt with it before. And what's happened simply is they've thrown that out. You see, at one time reincarnation was taught in the Catholic Church, but they'll deny it now. You see, but when you say that supposedly the church starts such and such, which is another situation. 325. And we have to understand the literal framework always gets people confused. You see, even the dates of times. How do we know this took place in 325? Well, that's what we were told. As Constantine came to power, such and such. It's what I was told in seminary. It was a way of grabbing hold of people and bringing them into the fold, so to speak. You see, and I went to a ARP seminary, which is Associate Reformed Presbyterian Church seminary. And we were taught all these things, and they go through all these it's amazing what you read and how the not philosophy, what their belief systems are. And this is how people are completely, they just believe. People just simply believe. They see something they think is true because simply is that what's the word? They're told that they're Christians now. When something happens in front of someone and they become a Christian, they're told now they're a Christian. Welcome. They give a hug to them. They do all these special things like communion, such and such, involved with people. And so it makes people feel inclusive, and it makes them feel safe. You see, that's just, this is immensely involved with that there, because it makes people feel safe because they feel, okay, I'm in a good group. These people love one another. They care about my children. They're not going to do any harm, to others, such and such. They want us to learn things, such and such. And it's a form of brainwashing, you see. But who's going to say that? Because no one knows that, So it's really sad. And I remember, studying this stuff, and it's what it is? It's immensely. It brings about a pride or being proud of certain things. I know what this means. I read this whole doctrinal handbook here. This is what it means, such and such. I remember simply is that people would, when we do some type of visitation with these particular churches I was involved in, that I couldn't understand. They just simply want to go to church. See, they want to go to church. That simply was a couple of reasons. For my kids, that's one of the big ones. The children. Do you have children's church, or you have a Sunday school program, or whatever, these such and such? And I'm looking at them, and it's like, what was your background? Well, we're Methodists, and so my thinking is thoughts. Here's the point. This is, this is in a way sometimes ridiculous, but yet it kind of shows the situation. Well, you believe in a certain way. You're an Armenian. You're not Reformed. In other words, how you don't understand the whole idea. This is when, this is many years ago, 25 years ago. And I was just looking at people, well, why would you want to come to a Presbyterian church? Because see, Calvinist simply says you're a sinner. In fact, so much of a sinner that you can't save yourself. You're a worm in God's eye. What a terrible way of seeing things. No, you're not a worm in God's eye. But this is how people are taught these things, and how people are confused. And I believe that, we're ultimate sinners. And, the whole idea, even when we talk about even Augustine, is the whole idea simply is the idea with the concept of sin, or where does sin come from? See, they couldn't say it came from God, because it can't come from God. Okay, so they had to intertwine some type of doctrine of theology, and Augustine was perfect for that. He did that. You see, his whole idea simply was that it's when you, quote unquote, have sex with another woman, a man and a woman having that and having a child. That's where man messes up. That's sin in Augustine's eyes. When you impregnate a woman. Do you understand how ridiculous that is? But that's, you see, Augustine laid these things out. You see, so he's the one who had these such and such. But Augustine didn't learn. I mean, not learn, but Augustine's background was he was a Manichaean, and a Manichaean was simply always in duality. He saw things as duality. You see. So he would bring that. He brought that to the table. But most people see. I pursued this church history degree, so to speak, because most pastors, preachers, don't take church history. Maybe 2 courses of church history. And that's it. That's it. They don't know anything about the Anabaptists. They don't know anything about the Methodists. You see, most of these people come into the church because they were brought up in the church, so to speak, as a Presbyterian, or a Christian Reformed church, so to speak. They're more to do with or a Lutheran church, such and such. Well, here's another question. Why did Luther and Calvin instituted the quote unquote the idea of infant baptism? Because that's what the Catholics did, you see. But they changed it to a nuance, so to speak. It still was done, quote unquote, in an infant baptism sort of way. But they didn't, again, like I said, they didn't throw away the foundation, you see. And also, Anabaptists, which are basically what we call Mennonites and Amish today, they discounted the whole Testament, you see. And so they discounted the whole idea of the New Testament, the Old Testament. That meant simply they believed in Jesus' teachings. That's what they meant. And so the Anabaptists, what people don't say, what do you mean by Anabaptists? Well, Anabaptists is not Baptist. This is another misconception. The Anabaptists were what I would call anti-infant baptism. That's one of the big deals with them. They did not believe in infant baptism because basically what they were seeing, again, in a literal term, see, this is what you got to see how these people get confused. They were looking at it literally and saying, oh, yeah, you know what? How does a child know he's of God? He's an infant. Well, the Catholic would say, well, they would say something, well, this is a protection such and such for this particular infant child. But this was engrafted in. You see, what I'm trying to explain to you simply is what the Anabaptists were saying in some ways was true. What are you talking about? Infant baptism. Okay. The child doesn't even know anything about salvation. You see. And so they would go, but they were looking at it literally too. See, this is how all these groups are part of this whole dynamic. And you have so many denominations. How many denominations do you have? And most of these leaders who, quote unquote, started these churches were based upon something that didn't fit. They didn't think that fit, or they saw scripture differently. And so they said, these people are not telling truth. Again, this is all based upon a literal framework. And so when you do that, you have these other guys say, nope, we don't look at scripture in a way that you look at it. And so this is what we see. And next thing you know, there's a group of people following this particular person. And it's just this is how people are so lost. It's really sad. The whole idea here with the church is simply there's nothing wrong with the Bible. That's what I'm trying to explain here. There's nothing wrong with the Bible. It is explaining truth. But when you come in with a presupposition that is literal, or if you come in with a presupposition that it is historical, you've already clouded what the scriptures are all about. Instead of actually just looking at scripture as being in a different way, is trying to reveal something deeper. But you're coming in for it's like putting on glasses. You can't see right now, so to speak. But if I put on these literal glasses or historical glasses, guess what? Oh, that makes everything different, you see. And then you have to have the whole idea of, there's a literal hell. There's no literal hell. If anything, this place is hellish in some ways. Yes, it's a hard place. It's a hard place to find salvation. That's what it means. It's a hard place. And when you grow up in a quote unquote, what's the word? You grow up, most children follow their parents in this. I mean, think about this. Most children, boys or girls, boys tend to adopt whatever their dad does, whatever he was. He may have been a wood craftsman. Sometimes he doesn't, but they follow their parents. Most of them follow simply in the area of religion. They do that. And you have to also ask yourself, okay, so why is in the West simply it's all to do with Christianity and such in churches. But if you go somewhere else, like the Muslim world, it's differently, or the Jewish world is different also, you see. And you're not accepted in that perspective, you see. And I don't want to get in a whole bog, but what I'm trying to say simply is there's nothing but division, you see. So, so these rituals are they actually in some ways bind you in some ways, and you think something's happening, but nothing's happening. And like I said, it's a group think. What I mean by group think is it's a psychological tool. The church used this in a psychological way. I'll say this: when there was what I would call the Reformation during the 1400s, late 1400s, 1500s, that were taking place with Luther, Calvin. But you have to understand that Luther was protected by what we call a prince in parts of probably northern Germany. So he was protected physically. Okay. And you had also Calvin, who was also protected when he was in Geneva by a city council. He was paid by the city council. Okay. So there's a red flag there. Then you have Zwingli, who's the other major reform leader, but no one knows much about. But Zwingli is also in Switzerland, and he also had a city council. So let me explain a little bit more about church history here, and I won't go more because it's getting late. But what I'm trying to share with you simply is, in parts of Europe, they were already beginning to what we call certain areas, what we call Catholic territory and Reformed territory. Okay. And these so-called, and you had at one time a free city, which was Strasbourg, which is on the border of France and Germany. And a free city was completely different than what we call Catholic territory, Reformed territory, of Calvinists, whatever you want to call it. There were areas of the geographically, seriously, that were etched out in some ways. This is a protected area. And some of that had to do with wars, you see. So when you had the issue of Strasbourg, the Free City, the whole idea with the Free City was simply is we don't accept any perspective except all perspectives. In other words, they would be what I call inclusive. Their hope was simply was to allow the Reformed people to have their churches there, have Catholics such and such, such and such. So they were kind of integrating these things, trying to do that. It took a little bit longer than what they anticipated. But the point simply is that, yes, most people don't know this. The Anabaptists were not, this is a serious business. I'm not agreeing with the Anabaptists. I'm just stating it simply, they were killed by not only the Calvinists, not only by the Lutherans, but also by the Catholics. And you say, well, why? You ask yourself, the blood is on their hands, you see. And so what is any different than you than a Muslim? Okay. You know, there were actually, Ferdinand was such and such, which quote unquote, in the gates of Vienna, Austria, such and such, trying to prevent the Muslims from taking over. And yet he was called, in their words at that time, was called the Antichrist. The Muslims were considered Antichrist, you see. Always, in a way, keeping people in fear in a lot of ways. And this is the Catholics, in my opinion, which are part of this, but Luther was a monk. Now, Calvin, I don't know much about it, simply he was at the University of Paris. I think his dad was involved with the church, some type of position with that in Paris. He graduated. I don't even know if he graduated. He was at Paris in school, and eventually he left, I think, because of certain things. You have to also understand that most of these universities at that time were laid out by either, not at first, but most of these were pretty much either Catholic universities at first, you see. So, yeah, it's, I'll say this much simply is that you have to be aware of the pitfalls of Christianity. And where I live I live in the South. So the South is very religious, enormously religious. They'll act 6 days a certain way, and then they go to church and they're different people. You see, this is a whole, it's sad. It's really sad. I don't hate these people. I don't have any hate for them. They're just simply blind. They don't know. And that's what they were before. It's the same thing as this. I'll say this and I'll leave. I was born a Democrat and I'm going to continue to vote that way. Or my dad was a Democrat or a Republican, whichever way you want to look at it. And I'm going to vote Republican. Or I'm going to vote Democrat. It's this whole idea simply is how people are not willing to think about things and what they do. They just simply do them. Part of it simply is fear. I'll say one more thing simply is I think I may have shared it maybe when I was 4 years old and I was in what I call a church, what they call fundamentalists. I don't know if you know what a fundamentalist is, but that's what they call an independent Baptist church. So they felt simply is that the scriptures were fundamentals, and they believed in a 6,000 year whole idea of creation. That's how old the earth is, because that's where the Bible was, and that's what they're talking about. You see, that's their framework. It's a historical view. And so at a very young age, at 4 years old, I was there in a service, and there were no children church there. There was basically all people sit there. And frankly, I got pretty scared when he basically said that, you're going to hell. And I took that personally. And I remember that because it was a form of trauma for me, because I didn't go to my mom as a boy would do when he gets hurt. He skins his feet, skins his neck, leg, whatever. I went to my dad, and I was crying because it scared the daylights out of me. Okay. And so I was looking to my dad to protect me from someone who would do something of that nature. Because in some ways, I instinctively knew something was wrong, but I didn't know. And yet, I later on, 4 years later, I become a Christian, you see, in a children's church, you see. And because my parents kept thinking they didn't know any better. They just did the same thing their parents did, you see. And you just have to understand that's what you and grow up into. And I didn't ever see these things until roughly when I was about 40 years old. You see, I was very active in the churches that I was involved in. I was a study leader. I was a singles Bible study leader for men. Now I was ingrained in that immensely. And so something was wrong. When I was in seminary, I was fortunate to go to a seminary that had 3 or 4 professors that taught church history. So church history, if it's even taught, you in that time, and it probably is still today, if you're seriously listening to what they're saying instead of just listening to what their garb, you begin to wonder. And I remember saying to something, excuse me, why did the reformers kill other people? Well, they took things seriously back then and they killed people. Excuse me, hold on. We have a problem here. You say you're Christians. You killed another group that says they're Christians. What's the difference? It's all, this is all bullshit, you see. So that's my last spiel tonight. I could talk longer than this. So, but it is really sad. And I remember simply learning in church history, early what they call patristics. And I'm grateful that I took these classes because that's the spark that basically got me to ask questions and say, excuse me, something is wrong. And I don't know what it is, but I'm not going to participate in this, you see. And again, like I said, when I had a friend to me says, why are you quitting seminary, such and such? You want to do this, such and such. You've done so many hours, such and such. You want to get a master's. I know you love this stuff. So it's not teaching truth. It's just not teaching truth. It's teaching error. But I didn't understand that. I simply didn't understand. But I just said, why would the Catholics deal with people who didn't agree with them? So, in other words, why would you? There are certain groups that were actually, the power and the reality long ago was actually in Northern Africa for the Catholic Church. That was where where the members were at. That's where the bulk of the church was. Although it was in Rome, it was also in the Jewish world, but a lot of it was actually in Northern Africa. And that's where Augustine was located. And Augustine got to the point of so much power, he became a very strong local person, roughly in the 400s. He dealt with what he called heresies. And when there were groups of what I would call a couple of churches that were different than what Augustine, a Catholic church, the Catholic means one church, universal church. It doesn't tolerate anybody else. You follow what I'm saying simply. There's no toleration with that perspective when you're the universal church. In other words, you're saying that you're of God and you're better than everybody else. You're far superior than anybody else. And so when you do that, you come in with someone else not teaching what they are, you try to correct them or whatever they call it, maybe and either throw them out or you consider them heretics. And that's how the Catholics dealt with it. But eventually, there were groups of people who no longer were part of this deal with what the Catholics, and then they got out of it. They didn't want any part of it. And Augustine attacked these people and actually asked the Roman army to destroy these people. Okay? Killed them. Okay? So that's how powerful Augustine was back then. And yet, the Reformed churches, all Reformed churches and all Catholic churches is considered the father of the church is Augustine. And he's the one who created all the theology pretty much at that point, the time frame he was in. Now, when you think about that, okay, You have other people who are involved. Eventually, the Eastern Orthodox Church, which was part of the Catholic Church, pulled out. Okay, and I don't know where they're at. Sometimes I wonder if their father is not considered Augustine. His name is John Chrysostom, I think is how you pronounce it. He was called his nickname was called Golden Mouth during those years, and that's in the 300s. And eventually, by 1200 or so, maybe a little later, they left. They moved out. There were one time 3 popes at one time in the Catholic Church. If that doesn't tell you that there's rampant falsehood, there were also people who didn't know anything about the scriptures, but yet they did these quote unquote Latin terms. The priests, they didn't know anything. They just simply said what they were told. They didn't know what it meant. They were bought. They were paid for. They had a job, you see. Okay, so that's how bad it was. And in a lot of ways, it's still somewhat like that. And it's sad. But anyway, I'm kind of digressed it here. So appreciate you saying some things. I don't know who is this about. Julius Evola in his Revolt Against the Modern World is a wonderful exposition of history. Read any Evola. I have never read. I don't even know who the guy is. I just know simply is that that what Phil Langdon is sharing, it makes far more sense and is the truth. I don't see any other thing anyone else. And the whole New Age deal you spoke about earlier is just a way of fooling people again, because it's, people like, for example, don't want to think. They want someone to spoon feed them. That's true of life in all categories. Yeah, that's true in areas of work-related deals. If you're going to be a working business, accounting, all these things, you don't question things. You just simply go along to get a job. It's a lot of times to do with money or prestige. So thank you for the comments. Wish you a good evening, and thanks again for all the comments you had here. Appreciate you. There's it's just amazing what's going on. Yeah, what's going on is correct. Yeah. So thank you, Mr. Antelope. You have a good evening. Take care.